September 14th, 2024. Sarah Martinez was cleaning out her childhood home for the final time, preparing to sell a house where her mother had lived for 43 years. Rebecca Martinez had died of cancer 10 years earlier, and Sarah had been unable to face this moment until now. The moment when she would finally close the door on her past and try to build a future without the woman who had been her anchor, her best friend, and her greatest source of pain. Sarah was 32, successful as a marketing director, but emotionally frozen in time since her mother's death. She had never married, despite several serious relationships that ended when she couldn't fully open her heart. She lived alone in a sterile apartment, worked 60-hour weeks, and kept everyone at arm's length because loving someone completely meant risking the devastating loss she had experienced when Rebecca died. But as Sarah pulled her mother's old jewelry box from the bedroom dresser, something rattled inside that shouldn't have been there. Hidden beneath the velvet lining was a sealed envelope with Sarah's name written in her mother's distinctive handwriting. Below her name, in smaller script, were the words, "To be open only after you've learned to live without me." 10 years had passed since Rebecca's death. 10 years of Sarah existing rather than living, of surviving rather than thriving, of building walls instead of bridges. Sarah had learned to function without her mother, but she had never learned to truly live. What Sarah didn't know was that the letter in her hands contained a secret that would shatter everything she believed about her life, her mother, and the family she thought she knew. Rebecca Martinez had been keeping a secret for 32 years, a secret so profound that it would force Sarah to rebuild her entire identity from the ground up. But first, you need to understand how a mother's love can be so fierce that it requires keeping the truth hidden for an entire lifetime, and how sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is the one they leave behind after they're gone. Rebecca Martinez had been the kind of mother that other women envied and other children wished they had. From the moment Sarah was born, Rebecca's world revolved entirely around her daughter. She was a single mother. Sarah's father had left when she was just 2 years old, claiming he wasn't ready for the responsibility of parenthood. But Rebecca never acted like single motherhood was a burden or a limitation. She worked as a high school English teacher, a job that allowed her to be home when Sarah got out of school and have summers free to spend with her daughter. Their house on Elm Street became a sanctuary of love, laughter, and endless conversations about books, dreams, and life. Rebecca was a mother who helped with homework every night, who attended every school play and soccer game, who made elaborate Halloween costumes and birthday parties that were legendary among Sarah's friends. She was also the mother who listened without judgment when Sarah went through her difficult teenage years, who offered wisdom without lectures, and who somehow managed to be both best friend and authority figure. "You can tell me anything, sweetheart," Rebecca would say during their late-night conversations in the kitchen. "There's nothing you could ever do or say that would make me love you less." Sarah believed her completely. Their relationship was built on absolute trust, complete honesty, and unconditional love. Rebecca shared stories about her own childhood, her dreams of becoming a writer, her struggles as a young single mother. Sarah felt like she knew her mother completely. Every story, every fear, every hope. When Sarah graduated valedictorian from high school, Rebecca cried tears of pride. When Sarah earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University, Rebecca drove her to campus and helped her move into her dormitory, staying positive even though Sarah could see the sadness in her eyes about their first separation. Throughout college and Sarah's early career, Rebecca remained her closest confidant. They talked on the phone daily, shared holidays and vacations, and maintained the kind of mother-daughter relationship that seemed effortless and unbreakable. Rebecca never remarried, though she dated occasionally. When Sarah asked about it, Rebecca would smile and say, "I have everything I need right here with you. Besides, no man could ever love you the way I do, and that's what matters most to me." Sarah felt guilty sometimes about being the center of her mother's universe, but Rebecca insisted that motherhood was her greatest joy and her most important job. She seemed genuinely happy, fulfilled by her teaching career and her role as Sarah's mother. But perfect mothers, as Sarah would learn 10 years too late, sometimes keep imperfect secrets. Rebecca Martinez had built her entire life around loving her daughter completely. But the letters Sarah found would reveal that everything she believed about their perfect relationship was built on a lie so profound that it shaped every day of Sarah's existence. The cancer diagnosis came when Sarah was 20, a junior in college majoring in communications. Rebecca called on a Tuesday evening in October, her voice steady but strained. "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully before you react." The words every adult child dreads. Breast cancer. Stage 3, aggressive treatment needed immediately. Sarah wanted to drop out of school to care for her mother, but Rebecca absolutely refused. "Your education is the most important thing right now," Rebecca insisted. "I'll have the best doctors, the best treatment, but I won't let cancer steal your future. Promise me you'll stay in school." It was the hardest promise Sarah ever made, but she kept it. She drove home every weekend, spent winter and spring breaks caring for her mother, and watched the woman who had always been her rock face to fight her life with characteristic grace and determination. The chemotherapy was brutal. Rebecca lost her beautiful hair, lost weight, lost the energy that had always made her seem younger than her years. But she never lost her spirit, never stopped asking about Sarah's classes and friendships and dreams for the future. "I'm so proud of the woman you're becoming," Rebecca would say during the worst days of treatment. "You're stronger than you know, sweetheart. Remember that when things get hard." For 2 years, Rebecca fought the cancer with everything she had. There were good days and bad days, moments of hope and periods of despair. Sarah graduated from college while her mother was in remission, and for a brief, beautiful year, it seemed like they had won the battle. But cancer is a cunning enemy. The disease returned when Sarah was 24, more aggressive than before and resistant to the treatments that had worked previously. This time, the doctors were honest about the prognosis. Months, not years. Rebecca faced her death sentence with the same strength she had shown throughout Sarah's life. She made lists of practical matters that needed to be handled, organized her finances and legal documents, and spent as much time as possible creating memories with Sarah that would have to last a lifetime. "I need you to promise me something," Rebecca said during one of their last conversations. "Promise me you won't spend your life mourning me. Promise me you'll find love, build a family, create a life that's full and rich and beautiful. I can't bear the thought of you being alone because you lost me." Sarah promised, but it was a promise she would struggle to keep for the next 10 years. Rebecca died on a rainy Thursday morning in March, surrounded by love but leaving behind a daughter who felt utterly lost without her guiding light. Sarah thought she knew everything about her mother's life and death, but the letter hidden in the jewelry box was about to reveal that Rebecca Martinez had been living with a secret so devastating that it had required her to reconstruct her entire identity to protect her daughter from the truth. The funeral was everything Rebecca would have wanted, filled with former students who shared stories about how she had changed their lives, colleagues who spoke about her dedication to teaching, and friends who remembered her kindness and generosity. Sarah delivered a eulogy that captured her mother's spirit perfectly, but inside she felt like she was dying along with the woman who had been her whole world. The grief was overwhelming and all-consuming. Sarah took a leave of absence from her job, barely left her apartment for months, and struggled to find any reason to keep going without her mother's love and support. Well-meaning friends and family members encouraged her to seek counseling, to join support groups, to find healthy ways to process her loss. But Sarah couldn't imagine a world where she functioned normally without Rebecca Martinez. Her mother hadn't just been her parent. She had been her best friend, her confidant, her role model for how to be a strong, independent woman. Without Rebecca's daily phone calls, weekend visits, and constant encouragement, Sarah felt like she was navigating life without a compass. Years passed, but the grief never fully lifted. Sarah returned to work, moved to a new city, built a successful career, but always with a sense that she was going through the motions of living rather than actually embracing life. She dated men who reminded her of her mother's approval, but never allowed herself to love completely, because losing someone again seemed impossible to survive. Every major milestone, promotions at work, birthdays, holidays, was tinged with sadness because the one person Sarah most wanted to share her successes with was gone. She kept Rebecca's house exactly as it had been when she died, unable to face the finality of clearing out her mother's belongings. Friends worried about Sarah's inability to move forward, but she couldn't explain that her relationship with her mother had been so complete, so all-encompassing, that learning to exist without it felt like learning to breathe underwater. What Sarah didn't realize was that Rebecca had anticipated this possibility. The devoted mother who had spent 32 years protecting her daughter from painful truths had left behind one final act of love, a revelation that would force Sarah to see herself and her life in an entirely different way. The letter Sarah was about to open contained 3 decades of carefully guarded secrets. But the most shocking revelation wasn't about Rebecca's past. It was about Sarah's identity and the family she never knew existed. Sarah's hand shook as she opened the envelope. Inside were 5 pages of her mother's handwriting, along with several official-looking documents and what appeared to be photographs she had never seen before. The letter began with words that immediately made Sarah's heart race. "My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you finally found the strength to truly live without me. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you believe about our family, about your life, and about who you are. I kept these secrets not to hurt you, but to protect you. Now that you're strong enough to handle the truth, you deserve to know who you really are." Sarah sank onto her mother's bed, the letter trembling in her hands as she continued reading. "Sarah, your name at birth was not Sarah Martinez. Your name was Isabella Rodriguez, and you were not born in Chicago as I've always told you. You were born in Phoenix, Arizona, and you were taken from me when you were 6 months old." The words made no sense. Sarah read them again then a 3rd time, but they still seemed impossible. She looked at the documents Rebecca had hidden with the letter: birth certificates, court records, newspaper clippings that told a story Sarah had never heard. "I was 17 when you were born, unmarried, and living on the streets after aging out of the foster care system. Your biological father was older, dangerous, involved with drugs and violence that I couldn't escape. When you were 6 months old, Child Protective Services took you away because I couldn't provide a safe home. You were placed in foster care, and I was told I would never see you again." Sarah's world tilted on its axis. Everything she thought she knew about her origins, her early childhood, her mother's young adulthood was a carefully constructed fiction. "But I never stopped fighting for you, my darling girl. I spent 2 years getting clean, finishing high school, finding stable housing and employment. I proved to the courts that I could be the mother you deserved. When you were 2.5, I was finally granted custody, but only on the condition that we relocate to a different state where your father couldn't find us." Sarah looked at the photographs tucked behind the letter. Pictures of a teenage girl who looked like Rebecca but younger and sadder, holding a baby who must have been Sarah. Court documents showing the custody battle. A restraining order against a man named Carlos Rodriguez. "I changed our names to Martinez, moved us to Chicago, and created a new life where we could be safe. I told everyone that your father had left when you were 2, because it was easier than explaining that we were running from a man who had threatened to kill us both. I built our entire life around making sure you never had to know the fear and instability that marked your first years." Rebecca's secrets were devastating, but the letter was far from over. Hidden in those pages was information about a family Sarah never knew existed, an inheritance that would change her financial future forever. But first, Sarah had to grapple with the revelation that her entire identity had been a protective lie. Sarah couldn't stop reading, even though each paragraph shattered another piece of her understanding of her life. "I never told you about your biological father, because Carlos Rodriguez was a violent man who spent most of your early years in prison. But what I also never told you was that his mother, your grandmother, never stopped looking for you. Maria Rodriguez has been searching for her granddaughter for 30 years, and she deserves to know that you're alive and thriving." Tucked behind the letter were more photographs, an elderly Hispanic woman at various stages of life, always with the same kind eyes that Sarah recognized from her own reflection. Birthday cards addressed to Isabella Rodriguez that had never been delivered. Letters from a grandmother who had never stopped believing she would find her missing granddaughter. Maria Rodriguez is 78 years old and lives in Tucson, Arizona. She owns a successful restaurant that has been in the family for 4 generations. She has 2 other sons who are your uncles, and several cousins who grew up hearing stories about the granddaughter who disappeared. You have an entire family who loves you without having met you. Sarah stared at photographs of people who shared her facial features, her smile, her hands. A family she had never known existed, who had been mourning her absence while she grew up believing she was alone in the world except for Rebecca. I know you'll be angry with me for keeping this from you, and you have every right to be furious. But Carlos died in prison 8 years ago, which means the danger that forced us into hiding is finally gone. Your grandmother has spent decades praying to meet you, and now that I'm gone, you're free to reclaim the family I had to take you away from. The letter continued with practical information, Maria's address and phone number, details about the family business, explanations about Mexican traditions and cultural heritage that Sarah had been cut off from. But it was the emotional weight of Rebecca's confessions that left Sarah feeling like she was drowning. I also need to tell you about the inheritance you'll receive from your biological family. Maria Rodriguez has been saving money for 30 years, building a trust fund for the granddaughter she hoped to find someday. When Carlos died, his portion of the family business became yours by inheritance law. You are now part owner of Rodriguez Family Restaurants, and your share is worth approximately $800,000. Sarah had gone from being a middle-class orphan to discovering she had a wealthy family and a significant inheritance she never knew existed. But more than money, my darling, you'll be inheriting a family who will love you completely. I've watched you struggle to build relationships because you're afraid of losing people you love. I've seen how my death has trapped you in a life that's smaller than the one you deserve. Your biological family represents the chance to be loved not just by me, but by an entire network of people who share your blood and your heart. Rebecca's final confession would reframe everything Sarah understood about love, sacrifice, and the lengths a mother will go to protect her child. But the decision of whether to contact a family she never knew would force Sarah to choose between the safe life Rebecca had built and the uncertain future that awaited her in Arizona. The final pages of the letter contained Rebecca's most heartbreaking admissions. Sarah, I need you to understand that every choice I made was motivated by love for you. When I took you away from your biological family, it wasn't because I wanted to keep you from them. It was because I was terrified that Carlos would find you and hurt you. When I created our new identities, it wasn't because I was ashamed of our past. It was because I wanted to give you a future where you could grow up safe and loved. Sarah was crying now, understanding for the first time the impossible situation her mother had navigated as a teenager. I spent 30 years wondering if I made the right choice. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone in your life, I thought about the grandmother who was missing your childhood. I thought about the aunts and uncles and cousins who would have adored you. I thought about the cultural heritage I was denying you access to. But I never regretted choosing your safety over everything else. Rebecca's handwriting became more emotional in the final paragraphs. Now that the danger is past and I'm gone, you have the chance to reclaim the family I had to take you away from. But I need you to know that no matter what you decide, no matter whether you contact Maria Rodriguez or choose to keep the life we built together, you were the greatest joy of my existence. Being your mother, even under false pretenses, was a privilege of my lifetime. The letter ended with instructions for contacting Maria Rodriguez, along with Rebecca's blessing for whatever decision Sarah chose to make. If you decide to meet your biological family, please tell them that I never stopped loving the baby I took away, and I never stopped being grateful that they gave me the chance to be your mother. If you decide to maintain the life we built together, know that it was built on love that was real and complete and perfect, even if the details were fictional. Either way, my darling daughter, please remember that you were loved completely by Rebecca Martinez and by the teenage mother who fought heaven and earth to keep you safe. You are not just Sarah Martinez. You're also Isabella Rodriguez, heir to a family legacy that stretches back generations and forward into a future filled with possibilities I could never have imagined for you. Live fully, loved completely, and know that wherever I am proud of the incredible woman you become. All my love forever, Mom. Sarah sat in her mother's bedroom for hours, surrounded by the evidence of secrets that had shaped her entire life. The photographs of Maria Rodriguez showed a woman with Sarah's eyes and smile, captured at family gatherings that looked warm and loving. The legal documents confirmed everything Rebecca had written. The custody battle, the name changes, the inheritance that was legally hers. But more than the shocking revelations about her identity, Sarah was grappling with a fundamental shift in how she understood love and sacrifice. Rebecca Martinez had not been just her devoted mother. She had been a teenage girl who had given up her own family, her own identity, her own cultural heritage to keep her daughter safe from danger. The perfect mother-daughter relationship Sarah had treasured was built on extraordinary sacrifice and painful choices that Rebecca had carried alone for 30 years. 3 days after finding the letter, Sarah made the phone call that would change her life forever. Hola! The voice that answered was elderly, speaking Spanish with the accent Sarah remembered from Rebecca's lullabies, though she had never understood why her mother knew so many Spanish songs. Is this Maria Rodriguez? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. There was a long pause, then a sharp intake of breath. ¿Quién es? My name is Sarah Martinez, but I think my birth name was Isabella Rodriguez. I think you might be my grandmother. The sound that came to the phone was pure joy mixed with 30 years of grief, a sob, a prayer, a thanksgiving all in one breath. Isabella? Eres tú, mi nieta? Isabella, is it really you? I found a letter from my mother. She told me everything. About Carlos, about why she took me away, about how you've been looking for me. Maria Rodriguez cried openly, switching between Spanish and English as she tried to process the miracle of hearing from the granddaughter she had never stopped praying she would find. Mija, we have been waiting for you for 30 years. Every birthday, every Christmas, every day we light a candle and pray that God would bring you home to us. 2 weeks later, Sarah flew to Tucson to meet the family she never knew existed. Maria Rodriguez was waiting at the airport with what seemed like 20 other people, uncles, aunts, cousins, and family friends who had heard the story of Isabella Rodriguez and wanted to welcome her home. The reunion was everything Rebecca's letter had promised. Maria held Sarah's face in her hands and cried, saying over and over, Eres mi nieta, eres mi corazón. You are my granddaughter, you are my heart. The Rodriguez family embraced Sarah completely, sharing stories about the baby who had disappeared, showing her photographs of the father she had never known, who, despite his problems, had apparently been a loving son and brother before addiction destroyed his life, and introducing her to traditions and cultural heritage that felt both foreign and familiar. Your mother, Maria said, looking at photographs of Rebecca that Sarah had brought, she was so young, so scared, but she loved you completely. We could see that even when the courts took you away, she never stopped fighting for you. Sarah learned that Rebecca had sent Maria one letter after they moved to Chicago, a letter explaining that they were safe but could never return, asking Maria to forgive her for taking Isabella away and promising that she would raise her granddaughter with love and care. We understood, Maria said through tears. Carlos was dangerous when he was using drugs. We were afraid for you too. Your mother did what she had to do to keep you safe. Over the course of a week in Arizona, Sarah discovered not just a family, but an identity she had never known she was missing. She learned to make her great-grandmother's tamale recipe, heard stories about 4 generations of Rodriguez women who had been strong, independent, and fiercely protective of their families. She met cousins who welcomed her like a sister, and uncles who cried when they saw how much she looked like their lost brother. But most importantly, Sarah learned that love could exist in multiple forms simultaneously. She had been completely loved by Rebecca Martinez, but she was also completely loved by Maria Rodriguez and the family, who had never stopped believing she would come home. 6 months after finding her mother's letter, Sarah made a decision that would have made Rebecca proud. She moved to Tucson, took an active role in the family business, and began building relationships with the family she had been separated from for 30 years. But she never forgot the woman who had sacrificed everything to keep her safe. In her new home, Sarah displayed photographs of Rebecca Martinez alongside photographs of the Rodriguez family, honoring both the mother who raised her and the heritage she had been reconnected with. Rebecca's letter had given Sarah the greatest gift imaginable, not just a family she never knew existed, but the understanding that she had been loved completely by multiple families who had each made sacrifices to protect and nurture her. And for the first time in 10 years, Sarah felt truly alive, surrounded by love that stretched across generations and geography, built on the foundation of a teenage mother's courage and an elderly grandmother's faith that God would someday bring her granddaughter home.